The 1970s was an important time for the horror genre with the releases of films like Halloween, The Exorcist, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This era also produced blaxploitation horror films. Blaxploitation is described by Dr. Robin R. Means Coleman as a portmanteau of uniting the concepts of black and exploitation to define the black films of the 70s. These films centered black characters and issues that were faced by black people, but were exploitative in the fact that they had small budgets, reinforced stereotypes, and were misogynistic. This caused mixed responses to most of the films of this era, but despite that, people at the time saw these films as empowering and important to the culture. Themes that permeated this subgenre were recreating prior films and adaptations to black stories, centering white people and whiteness as the villain, and empowerment. All of which can be seen in the main film of this video essay, William Crane's Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde. The 1970s were the height of the civil rights and black power movement. The Civil Rights Act was passed 1 decade prior in 1964, which was a big achievement for black people, but there were also setbacks in the tragic murders of both Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. This time period was filled with a lot of turmoil and saw black people being shot down, hosed, and attacked by police dogs. With all the attention and energy focused around these movements and black empowerment, blaxploitation incorporated the element of fighting back against the man. The filmmakers sought to bolster the empowerment of the political climate, and the predominantly black casts of these films were well received by black audiences, although this was not without controversy. Black leaders detested these films for shallowly co-opting the ideals of the civil rights and black power movements and besmirching them. This was due to the prevalence of the blaxploitation films' plots revolving around pimps, drugs, prostitutes, and gangs. Critics disagreed back and forth over whether these films were perpetuating a one-dimensional view of black people and stereotyping them, or if they were a step in the right direction. Another important historical moment of this era was the exposing of the Tuskegee study. In 1972, Associated Press released an article revealing the U.S. Public Health Service took a sample of black men in the Tuskegee Institute in Macon, Alabama, and intentionally did not treat them for syphilis, for research purposes. This study went on for 40 years and was done without the consent of the men. In 1973, a class action lawsuit was filed, which led to a $10 million out-of-court settlement. This event created a huge conversation about black people and medical experimentation, which shows in the 1976 blaxploitation horror film, Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde. The movie was created by director William Crane, who directed another blaxploitation horror film titled Blackula just 4 years prior. It's an adaptation of the novel Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and stars former football player Bernie Casey as Dr. Henry Pride. He is a well-off medical doctor who helps the poor people and prostitutes of his area. Dr. Pride is trying to create a cure for hepatitis and unethically injects a dying woman with his untested cure. This is a nod to the Tuskegee experiment in that Dr. Pride is non-consensually performing medical experiments. The injection turns the black patient into a white woman, but she is a monster and attempts to kill a nurse before dying herself. Pride does not see this and decides to test the cure on himself to see the side effects. The injection turns him into a white man with superhuman strength. In this monstrous form, he goes downtown and searches for one of his patients, Linda, who is a prostitute. Pride attacks numerous people and destroys buildings in his rampage before turning back to his regular self. Henry then tries to seduce Linda into taking the injection to cure her hepatitis. The film ends as Dr. Pride transforms back into the white man and is hunted by the police. He is cornered and the police send the dogs to attack him, as was seen during the civil rights protests, but Pride kills the dogs. He then climbs to the top of an electric tower like King Kong and is shot down by the cops. The film centers white people as the villain in that when Dr. Pride becomes a monster, he literally transforms into a white man. As a monster, he goes on to only target the prostitutes and pimps in the town. It also highlighted the bad relations between the black community and police, as Linda doesn't go to the cops even after finding out that Dr. Pride is the one who has been committing the murders. The movie perpetuates stereotypes with two of the main characters, Linda and Silky, being a prostitute and pimp respectively, but also in a more positive light as the benevolent doctors Henry and his wife Billy. All in all, Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde was a new spin on a classic story, emblematic of black horror in the 1970s.